Hi there. If life has felt heavy lately, let this story be a gentle light in the dark. You're not alone. Stay with us for a little kindness. Pennies scattered everywhere. 7-year-old Cody Brennan crawled under his bed, searching for every copper coin he could find. His small fingers trembled as he counted them for the third time today. 47 cents, he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible in the cramped apartment on Willowbrook Avenue. The boy had been collecting pennies for 3 weeks now. Every discarded coin on the sidewalk, every cent from returning bottles, every penny his mother accidentally dropped from her purse while rushing to her second job. He kept them all in a cracked mason jar hidden beneath his pillow. Tomorrow was his mother's birthday. Sarah Brennan would turn 28, though she looked older these days. The dark circles under her eyes had become permanent fixtures since his father left 6 months ago, taking with him not just his clothes but also their financial security. Cody pressed his face against the cold window of their ground-floor apartment. Across the street stood Morrison's Bakery, its warm yellow lights cutting through the October evening darkness. He had walked past it every day on his way to school, watching other children pick out colorful cupcakes and birthday cakes with their parents. His mother had always made his birthday special, even when money was tight. She would bake him a cake from scratch, sing to him, and somehow make him feel like the luckiest boy in the world. But her birthday last year had passed without celebration. She had worked double shifts at the diner and came home too exhausted to even notice the handmade card he had left on the kitchen table. He remembered finding that card 3 days later, still sitting there untouched. The construction paper had curled at the edges, and his crayon drawing of their family looked somehow sadder in the dim kitchen light. That night, he had heard his mother cry in the bathroom, the sound muffled by running water, but still audible through the thin walls. Cody had learned to recognize the different types of his mother's tears. There were the frustrated tears when bills arrived in the mail, the angry tears after phone calls with his father, the exhausted tears when she thought he was asleep. But that night, hearing her sob on her forgotten birthday, he had heard something new, hopeless tears, the kind that came from someone who had stopped believing good things could happen to her. That memory haunted him now as he counted his pennies. He had made a promise to himself that night, whispering it into his pillow while his mother cried alone in the next room. He would never let her feel forgotten again. He would find a way to make her smile, really smile, the way she used to when Dad still lived with him and life felt easier. The weight of that promise sat heavy on his 7-year-old shoulders. But love, he had learned, made even the heaviest burdens feel possible to carry. This year would be different. This year, he would give her the birthday she deserved. The next morning, Cody woke before dawn. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake his mother, who had finally fallen asleep on the couch after another late shift. The jar of pennies felt heavy in his small hands as he made his way down the empty street. Morrison's Bakery wouldn't open for another hour, but Cody sat on the concrete steps anyway. He watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, just like the frosting on the birthday cakes in the bakery window. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front door opened. An elderly man with flour-dusted hands and kind eyes looked down at the small boy sitting on his doorstep. "Well, hello there, son," the man said, his voice carrying a gentle southern accent. "I'm Frank Morrison. What brings you here so early?" Cody stood up, clutching his jar of pennies. "I need to buy a birthday cake for my mom." Frank's weathered face softened. He had owned this bakery for 37 years and had seen countless children with their parents, but rarely had he encountered a child shopping alone for something so important. "A birthday cake, you say? Well, that's mighty special. Come on in and let's see what we can do." The bakery smelled like heaven to Cody. Fresh bread, sweet frosting, and something that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen before she passed away. Display cases lined the walls, filled with an array of pastries, cookies, and cakes that seemed to glow under the warm lights. "Now then," Frank said, wiping his hands on his apron. "What kind of cake did you have in mind for your mama?" Cody's eyes were wide with wonder, but reality quickly set in. "I don't know how much cakes cost, but I have 47 cents. Frank's heart clenched. 47 cents wouldn't even buy a single cupcake, let alone a birthday cake. But something in the boy's earnest expression reminded him of his own childhood, of times when a few coins felt like a fortune. Well, let's see what we can work out, Frank said carefully. Tell me about your mom. What's her favorite flavor? She likes vanilla, Cody said, his voice growing more animated. And she loves flowers. She always stops to smell the ones outside Mrs. Henderson's house on Oakwood Drive. Frank nodded thoughtfully. Vanilla with flowers. I think I might have just the thing. As Frank moved around the bakery, gathering ingredients and supplies, Cody watched in fascination. The older man's movements were practiced and graceful, like a dancer who performed the same routine for decades. You know, Frank said as he began mixing batter, I've been in this business for a long time, and I've learned that the best cakes aren't just about the ingredients. They're about the love that goes into them. Cody nodded seriously, though he wasn't entirely sure what that meant. Tell me more about your mama, Frank continued. What makes her special? The boy's face lit up. She works really hard. She has 2 jobs, and she's always tired, but she still reads to me before bed, and she makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the whole world. And when I have bad dreams, she lets me sleep in her bed. Cody's voice grew softer, more thoughtful. Sometimes I wake up and find her sitting at the kitchen table really late, looking at papers and crying. She tries to hide it, but I know she's scared. I heard her talking to her sister on the phone, saying she doesn't know how much longer we can stay in our apartment. Frank's hand stilled for a moment as he processed the boy's words. He had seen struggle before, had lived through depression as a child, but hearing this small boy speak so matter-of-factly about his mother's fear broke something inside him. She sold her wedding ring last month. Cody continued, unaware of the impact his words were having. She thought I didn't notice, but I did. She told me it was at the jewelry store getting cleaned, but I saw her put the money in the envelope with the rent. She cried after she thought I went to sleep. The older man cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously wet. Your mama sounds like the strongest person I know. She is, Cody said with absolute certainty. But even strong people need birthday cakes, don't they? Frank nodded, unable to trust his voice. This child understood something about love and sacrifice that many adults never learned. In his innocence, he had grasped the fundamental truth that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who need the most care. As the cake baked, Frank learned more about Cody's life. The boy talked about his father leaving, about his mother crying when she thought he was asleep, about how hard she worked to keep them in their small apartment. He spoke without bitterness, just with a matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who had been forced to grow up too quickly. When the cake was finished, Frank had created something beautiful. A small but perfect vanilla cake with buttercream roses and shades of pink and white. It wasn't the most elaborate cake in his display case, but it was made with more care than anything he had baked in years. Now, Frank said, placing the cake in a white box, about payment. Cody eagerly pushed his jar of pennies across the counter. I counted 3 times. It's exactly 47 cents. Frank looked at the jar, then at the hopeful face of the young boy. You know what? 47 cents is exactly what this cake costs. Cody's eyes widened. Really? It's enough? More than enough? Frank said, taking the jar. In fact, let me give you some change. He handed Cody a $20 bill. This is for being such a good customer. The boy stared at the money in disbelief. But I can't take this. It's too much. Son, sometimes in life, we get more than we expect. Today is one of those days. Cody carefully took the cake box and the $20 bill, his small hands shaking with excitement. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Thank you so much. As the boy headed toward the door, Frank called out, Hold on there, young man. I'd like to know how the party goes. Would you mind if I stopped by later to meet your mama? Cody's face broke into the biggest smile Frank had seen all day. She would love that. We live at 247 Willowbrook Avenue, apartment 3B. Frank nodded, already planning his visit. I'll be there around 7 o'clock. Cody practically floated home, the cake box precious in his arms. He spent the rest of the day cleaning their small apartment, arranging the few decorations he could find, and waiting for his mother to come home from work. Sarah Brennan arrived at 6:30, exhausted from another long day at the diner. She found her son sitting at their small kitchen table, grinning from ear to ear. "Happy birthday, Mom," Cody said, his voice filled with pure joy. Sarah looked around the apartment, noticing the homemade decorations, the hand-drawn birthday card, and most surprisingly, a professional-looking cake sitting in the center of the table. "Cody, honey, where did this cake come from?" "I bought it for you," he said proudly. "I saved all my pennies for 3 weeks, and Mr. Morrison made it special just for you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She knew her son had been collecting pennies, but she had no idea why. The fact that he'd saved them for her birthday, that he had somehow managed to buy a cake, overwhelmed her with emotion. "Sweetie, this must have cost so much more than your pennies." Mr. Morrison said 47 cents was exactly the right amount. Cody said, then pulled out the $20 bill, and he gave me change. Sarah stared at the money, understanding immediately what had happened. A stranger had shown kindness to her son, had made her little boy feel capable and important. She had to meet this man. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a gentle knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find Frank Morrison standing in the hallway, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm Frank Morrison. I met your son this morning." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "Please, come in. I need to thank you for what you did." Frank stepped into the modest apartment, taking in the scene. The cake sat on the table, partially eaten, with 2 lit candles flickering in the dim light. Cody was beaming with pride, and Sarah looked like she had been crying happy tears. "No thanks needed," Frank said, handing Sarah the flowers. "Your boy did something remarkable today. He showed me what real love looks like." As they sat around the small table, sharing cake and conversation, Frank learned about Sarah's struggles. She had been working 2 jobs since her husband left, trying to keep up with rent and expenses. She rarely had time for herself, let alone celebrations. "You know," Frank said thoughtfully, "I've been looking for some part-time help at the bakery. Someone to work the morning shift, maybe help with customer service. It wouldn't be much, but it might be better than the diner job." Sarah looked up, hope flickering in her tired eyes. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I could use someone who understands what it means to work hard and care about others. Plus, I think Cody would enjoy visiting the bakery after school." The conversation continued late into the evening. Frank shared stories about his own life, about losing his wife 5 years earlier, about how lonely the bakery had become. Sarah talked about her dreams of going back to school, about wanting to give Cody a better life. As Frank prepared to leave, he turned to Cody. "Young man, you taught me something important today. You showed me that sometimes the smallest gestures can mean the most." But Frank had something else to say, something that had been building in his heart throughout the evening. He knelt down to Cody's level, placing gentle hands on the boy's shoulders. "You know, son, I lost my wife 5 years ago. Since then, this old house has been mighty quiet. I've been baking cakes for other people's celebrations, but I hadn't felt the real joy of celebration in a long time." His voice caught slightly. "Today, watching you love your mama the way you do, seeing the light in her eyes when she realized what you had done, you gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Cody listened with the serious attention children reserve for moments they sense are important. "You reminded me that families aren't just about blood," Frank continued. "They're about people who choose to love each other. And if you and your mama would have me, I'd be honored to be part of your family." Sarah wiped away fresh tears, nodding wordlessly. She had learned that sometimes angels come disguised as ordinary people, and sometimes the most profound blessings arrive through the pure heart of a child with 47 cents and an enormous love. Cody hugged Frank's legs, his small arms barely reaching around the older man's waist. "Will you come to my birthday party in December?" Frank's eyes misted over. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." After Frank left, Sarah tucked Cody into bed. As she kissed his forehead, she whispered, "Thank you for the most beautiful birthday I've ever had." She sat on the edge of his bed for a long moment, watching his sleepy face in the dim light from the hallway. This child, her child, had somehow found a way to heal not just a broken heart, but the heart of a lonely widower as well. In his simple act of love, he had created something she had never expected to find again. Hope. "Mom." Cody's voice was drowsy but content. Do you think Dad would have liked Mr. Morrison? The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on moving forward that she hadn't considered how her son might still be processing his father's absence. I think, she said carefully, that anyone who could love you the way Mr. Morrison already does would make your father proud of the boy you become. Cody smiled sleepily. I think Mr. Morrison's heart was lonely, just like yours was. Maybe we can help each other not be lonely anymore. From a mouth of babes, Sarah thought, marveling at her son's wisdom. He had understood something she was only beginning to grasp. That healing happens not just when we receive love, but when we give it freely to others who need it. I love you, Mom, Cody said sleepily. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the birthday cakes in the world. 3 months later, Sarah was working at Morrison's bakery, learning the trade and slowly building a new life for herself and Cody. Frank had become like a grandfather to the boy, teaching him about baking and life in equal measure. On Cody's 8th birthday, Frank presented him with a special cake, decorated with a jar of pennies made from chocolate. This is to remind you, Frank said, that sometimes the smallest things can create the biggest changes. Sarah watched her son's face light up with joy, remembering that October morning when it sat on a bakery doorstep with 47 cents and a dream. She had learned that kindness often comes from unexpected places, that strangers can become family, and that sometimes the most precious gifts are the ones we give to others. The birthday cake that day was delicious, but the real sweetness came from the love that surrounded the table. 3 people who had found each other in the midst of their separate struggles, brought together by a little boy's wish to make his mother smile. In the years that followed, Frank would often tell the story of the boy with 47 cents who taught him that the best baker in the world isn't measured by its profits, but by the love it helps create. And Sarah would remember that sometimes, when life seems darkest, a single act of kindness can light the way forward. The pennies in Cody's jar had been worth far more than their face value. They had been worth a new beginning, a found family, and a reminder that love, like the perfect cake, is best when shared with others. Every birthday thereafter, no matter how elaborate the celebration became, Sarah would remember that October evening when her 7-year-old son gave her the most precious gift of all, the knowledge that she was truly loved, completely and unconditionally, by the bravest little boy she had ever known.